In the workshop tonight, we're covering the measles interview. You know, we can't say debate. It wasn't really. That's the irony. It really wasn't a debate. We didn't get to openly debate on the show, but we covered a lot of information. But it's very, of course, quick. And so, what we're doing tonight is taking each one of the clips and breaking it all down so that I can actually answer all the stuff that I was chomping at the bit to be able to respond to. So we're going to be covering, you know, of course, you're going to get both sides of the argument here, but I'm going to really give a lot of the details that get skipped over, you know, because what you're going to see, and I want to point this out first and foremost, I want to make this disclaimer right at the beginning. I love and respect Eric Reynolds. Love the guy. Great guy. Known him for a long time. And, you know, he does an excellent job at what he does, you know, playing, unlike most, you know, as you know, in media today, it seems everything is complete polar opposites. You know, one side is raging on this side and the other side is raging on that side. This is one of the few that I know that actually just plays it dead center down the middle and has no opinion either way. So love and respect the guy. Same thing with Dr. Dobbs. I'm not here to bash another doctor. I'm not here to bash a pediatrician, and that is not the point in tonight. So, you know, if, you know, when it comes to the information, you know, everything, take it with a grain of salt. You know, it's, even if you disagree with something, you got to understand those positions are the official positions. You know, so I'm not going to, my purpose is not to throw her under the bus or anything like that. I'm just giving you the other side that is not the official position. You know, so, and of course I'm going to back up everything that we show. So I just want to get that in the clear up front. You know, we're not here to derail anybody. Okay, so the way this is going to go is it's going to play a clip. It will go through, you know, likely one question and finish that question, and then I'll break down the information that was given there from the opposite side of the spectrum. Okay, so we're going to get rolling here, and hopefully the sound will be loud enough. How you doing?
Good Sunday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, our topic concerns our health and is making national headlines. We're talking about the measles outbreak in the United States. And as you may know, government health officials have launched a massive awareness campaign to combat the rising number of measles cases. According to some health officials, the outbreak shows no signs of slowing down. In fact, on June the 6th, the Centers for Disease Control announced that there are more than 1,000 confirmed individual measles cases in 28 states. Now, you may remember back in May, Alabama health officials announced a baby in St. Clair County had come down with measles. But after further testing, it was confirmed the infant did not have the disease. Measles cases, though, however, have been confirmed in Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar blames the increase on those who don't get inoculated because they mistrust the vaccinations.
We know that vaccines are safe and effective. Vaccines are some of the most tested medical products that we have and one of the most important public health tools ever developed. And yet, as all of us know, the United States is now seeing the largest outbreak of measles since the disease was declared eliminated from our country. One of the reasons, and therefore one of the most pressing public health challenges our country faces, is vaccine hesitancy, driven in part by misinformation. And this administration has an all-hands-on-deck strategy for tackling vaccine hesitancy and promoting vaccination.
All right. You guys notice how the language is always so very pointed. You know, vaccine hesitancy and misinformation. You know, there are these cue words that, and you notice how the cue lines, these little catchphrases, they're different this year than they were last year, and they'll be different next year, right? It's always being updated, you know, to fit the new changing perspective. So basically, what it seems like happening is, in the off season, right? Everybody sits around and tries to figure out, okay, well, what was the response of the public, and how do we need to change the conversation, and how are we going to address this the next time it comes around? Because is it going to come around again? The answer is absolutely yes, as we're going to cover tonight. And it's not because of why, the general topic is being talked about. But when you look at the actual cases, I want to also point out something as well. A meme that I saw on Facebook that's kind of circulating now said it perfectly. Beyond anything else, it was a picture of the legislative session, of all the senators or Congress all standing there and doing their, I guess, oath out of office, and it said the legislative session is over. So ironically, there's no more measles cases. That the measles outbreak is over. Because it of course goes with the when they're trying to push the laws. That's when all of this is being talked about real heavily. And the second that they go out of session and you can't push any laws anymore, all of a sudden, poof, it just disappears. And so, not ironically, I was just getting to looking at everything today, and I looked through the information, that the recent articles in the last 48 hours about measles, and what is everything talking about? All of a sudden, everything is dropping off, right? There's only been 7 new cases in the last week, and so they're saying that basically the outbreak is looking to be fizzled out. It's not surprising. It's when you call attention to everything. A kid gets a few little red dots on him, a little minor rash, and they go to the doctor immediately. And how many of those cases get called measles? And they get tacked up even though they don't do the testing. How many of the cases do parents take their kid to get the vaccine because of all the stuff on the media, and then they get a rash and infection from the shots, which does happen, and they can actually test for that. We can test for that. You can do a test and see if it's wild measles versus measles from the shot. But how often do you think they do that? Of these 1,099 cases or whatever it is now, how many of those cases do you think they did that for? Guarantee you not many. There was one case in Alabama, the only one case that I'll talk about, that they declared it measles, their first case in Alabama, and then they had to go back and say, actually, no, it wasn't. We don't know what the situation, why they changed the diagnosis. Maybe it's because it was from the shot. And so they decided to pull it back before it becomes, attended to. But either way, that's what really tends to go on here, is there's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes. But either way, the cases are taking a nosedive now, as expected. We see that coming all the time. Who was here back in the day when we did the swine flu workshop and the bird flu workshop, right? You guys remember those? So it's the same thing, when they're just going crazy on the media, and I'm doing a workshop about the bird flu and how, no, this is not going to be the zombie apocalypse. I think one of them was actually called the zombie apocalypse for that reason. So anyhow, 1,000 cases in perspective, okay? This is just fascinating when you really look at the history and the numbers. In 1920, the United States had, and just on the foresight, it wasn't until the 1960s that the vaccine came out. Okay, so in the 1920s, the United States had 469,000 recorded cases of measles. This is recorded cases that were actually documented. All right, and there were 7,575 deaths associated from those cases. Okay, now what does that mean, associated? That means it could be anything. Okay, we know that there's a lot of information now. You go and you look at go back and watch my vitamin A workshop, because that's right on target here. Vitamin deficiencies were a big thing. The way that we cared for respiratory infections and rashes was different. So times have changed dramatically in how we even address it now. The CDC guidelines say now for measles, take vitamin A, and go home. That's basically what they do now. So there were 7,575 deaths associated. From 1958 to 1962, though, the U.S. averaged more cases. You see that? It went up to 503,282 cases from 469,000. Yet the death rate actually dropped from 75 down to 432 deaths. Okay? That's curious, right? So all of a sudden we're seeing this massively deadly disease drop significantly in the numbers. All right, why is that? Might it be because we're caring for it differently? All right. Prior to the introduction of the measles vaccine in 1963, though, the CDC admits there was massive underreporting of measles cases because in most cases it's a minor infection. And parents knew what it was, and so they don't take their kids to the doctor. I mean, I'm from the chickenpox era, right? I don't know that I went to the doctor when I had chickenpox. How many people just sat at home and did nothing, right? They don't go to the doctor and get on record and get testing and everything. And we look at it now, right, who had chickenpox, and we think, I mean, it was no big deal. Like, I'm sure some people really had a bad time with chickenpox, and maybe even there were some deaths. I don't know, but I remember it, and I remember itching, and that was about it for, a couple of days, and then everything was back to normal. But when I talk to the elderly population, all of my patients that I've seen over the last, 15 years, that they write measles on there, and we'll quick chat about it, and my question is always the same. Well, how was that? Oh, I don't even remember it. It was no big deal. Like, and they're like mind blown that we're blowing it up the way that we are right now. They're like, oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. Like how everybody's blowing it up. I had it. It was like a rash. It was no big deal. I don't remember. All of my friends had it, right? And we think about that as chickenpox. But mark my words, if things continue to go the way that they are, okay, in another 10 years, when our generation is the older ones, they're going to be saying the same thing about chickenpox. They're going to be making a big deal out of it, right? Because we have a vaccine for it, so you have to market it, and that's how it works. Even though we know we had it, so massive underreporting of measles cases, and that because virtually all children acquired measles. The number of measles cases probably reached 3.5 million per year. But think about it, 3.5 million per year. So in 1960, 3 years before the first measles vaccine was ever given in the U.S. market, there were about 442,000 reported cases of measles and 380 related deaths among the 3.5 to 5 million Americans who were likely infected. Yes?
Do you know about what the populations of those different times were?
Population of the U.S. As a whole.
These are U.S. numbers, right?
Yeah. The children population was 3.5 to 5 million.
Okay.
It was somewhere in that. It could have gone a little bit higher. I don't know exactly what the population was then. I know that it now is 327 million. So it was probably 250 million, somewhere in that area. So I don't know exactly what the number was, but 3.5 to 5 million Americans is what they estimated according to their statistics. So now in 1969, measles deaths were estimated at 1 in 10,000 cases. That's what it boils down to. So the live virus was actually started in circulation in 1963, the inactivated in 1964. So on the map, this is where they came in. Okay, and this map shows you from 1935. This doesn't even show you 1920, right? As far back as these statistics go. They didn't really report it before then. It wasn't until 1920 that we started keeping these statistics. So 1920 was, way up here somewhere. And we see this massive decline. Well, the question is obvious then. If the vaccine eliminated the disease, why did this happen? Right? And not only why did this happen, 2, what would have happened if we didn't put a vaccine on the market? 3, why did it flatten out the minute that we started vaccinating for it and actually continue on past that point? Right? Those are very important questions that nobody seems to address. In fact, it's the exact opposite. If you get on the CDC's website and you look at their data, just looking at this, where do you think they show the map? They take their little map and they do this. Right here. That's what they show you. They cut out all of this data before and they only look at, on their little grid, where the cases were, and of course they blow this up. They made this look bigger, so it looks like the decline is there after the vaccine, and they say in the stats, see, the vaccine caused the decline. It doesn't explain any of this. It doesn't even show it to you. That's a big deal, right? People need to understand what was really going on here. In fact, we see the same thing reported in other areas around the world, England and Wales, Canada. We see these same statistics happen, okay? So the question becomes, what would have happened if we didn't ever put the vaccine on, right? What would have happened to the death rate? What would have happened to the cases, okay? We're going to answer that a little bit more as we go, okay? Now, the words that are coming out, vaccine hesitancy and misinformation, okay? You guys, that's new to you, right? I mean, you didn't hear that until this year. Did anybody talk about vaccine hesitancy in previous years?
It was more like anti-vaccination.
Anti-vaccination, yeah. So think about it. Why would they do that? Why are they changing the lingo to vaccine hesitancy?
Political correctness.
Political correctness, but it's something even more. I mean, this stuff is highly intelligent. I mean, it's really neat looking backwards and trying to figure out why they do these things. And it really comes down to this, the word misinformation. Because the script that they want to write is that the information is wrong, right? Any anti-vaccination information is just wrong. There's no right to it. It's just wrong. It's misinformation. So, therefore, anybody that believes that, it's not that they're opposed to vaccines. It's just that they're vaccine hesitant because they don't know any better yet. You see how that works? So they're thinking about and changing the lingo to present an idea to the people who are already bought in. You know, so anybody that really believes that vaccines are the salvation of mankind, despite the information that we just saw and everything else, to them, you know, well, okay, now it's my job to correct the misinformation. You know, so anytime I see it on social media, et cetera, I'm going to blast you for it. And I'm going to call you an idiot, you know, and everything else. You know, what everybody that has ever posted anything has had happen, right? But that's where that really comes in, and that's why. And you see this happening all over the place, okay? And you're going to see it a lot more because this campaign is deeply entrenched, and it goes way deeper than any of us want to know. In fact, on I think it was on June 3rd, they enacted a new algorithm through Google, and with that, we saw a lot of the major sources of misinformation. Mercola.com, naturalnews.com, drjoshax.com, kellybroganmd.com. All of these big websites that people go to all the time, they saw their traffic drop about 90% overnight. Overnight. They used to pop up as the #1 listings on there because that's where people went. And that's how it worked. But once they changed it all, they are redirecting people away from there, and they're all going to official sources, WebMD, Healthline, and all the main sources of where they want you to go. In fact, it goes so far as if you put in a keyword, organic is, look at all of you can do this on your phone. Later, pull up Google and put up organic is, and it says organic is a lie, organic is always non-GMO, is a sham, is a myth, waste of money, marketing gimmick, always non-GMO. If you look up chiropractic, chiropractic is fake, chiropractic is pseudoscience, chiropractic is a lie. You see all this stuff, that's what's coming up now. If you look up GMOs, GMOs are great, GMOs are healthy, GMOs are scientific. You know, if you look up autism, you get I'm sorry. If you put in vaccines cause, the first one that comes up is vaccines cause adults. Who searches vaccines cause adults? But vaccines cause autism is nowhere on those automatic suggestions list. And this is very politicized too. If you type in Hillary Clinton's, guess what doesn't come up? Hillary Clinton's emails, right? Even though that was the #1 thing that was searched. You will not see Hillary Clinton's emails. But if you put in Donald Trump, guess what it says? Donald Trump's emails. It's like, you got to see this stuff is politicized.
They were deleted though.
Yeah.
They were deleted though.
Yeah, exactly. It's all of this stuff is designed, you know, this is called social engineering. Okay, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, you can spend hours looking through how all this works, but this is this is the direction that they're pushing in. The AMA says mature 12-year-olds can consent to vaccines without parents. Okay? What, anybody in here have kids? Okay. Can anybody tell me, or acknowledge me, what is a mature 12-year-old?
It does not exist.
Thank you. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you think you're mature at 12, but it doesn't exist, okay? So, but here I guarantee you is what they're getting at. The sign of a mature 12-year-old is what? One that decides that their parents are wrong. That's the descriptor of a mature 12-year-old is my parents are wrong and I should be vaccinated. So what they're breeding is dissent, not consent, right? But this is the direction that things are going because it's all about pushing that agenda no matter what, okay? Most tested safe and effective. They have not. Yeah, I mean, you notice how this is the official stance from the highest levels of government, right? And yet they say these things, most tested, safe, effective, best scientific revelation, mankind has ever came up with. These are the things, and it's very pointed, like this is it, okay? But they have not performed individual safety studies on the adjuvants and ingredients. Not been done. You think that should be done, right? I mean, if you're gonna put it in there, that has to be done from a scientific standpoint. You used to be a researcher, right? Would you think that would have to be done, right? Absolutely. Okay? They have not performed studies comparing the health of vaccinated to unvaccinated children. That must be done. How do you know if something is working if you don't test the population that isn't using it? Like, I mean, if you were studying fish and how a fish food affects fish, you would look at fish that don't eat the food, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. It's really very, very easy stuff, but they won't do it. They have not performed studies comparing the autism rate of vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. They say vaccines don't cause autism, but they say that without ever doing the testing to prove it. So these statements, in other words, are much more propaganda than they are scientific. They're not backed up by the science that they say so scientifically assured of, right? Throughout the vaccine's history, they have claimed it was effective and would eradicate measles and have repeatedly raised the bar for herd immunity, yet here we are, and we're going to cover that a little bit more in detail. But before we get to the next one, the deception of disease versus infection. I want to hint on this here for a second too, because who in here has ever had the flu? Okay, come on. Everybody has had the flu. People were distracted by the barista. So we all pretty much have had the flu or some degree of it. Okay. Now, if I were to ask you, do you have flu disease? Or do you have influenza disease? Would I get some weird looks?
Yes.
I mean, if I went to the mall and I asked 100 people, have you ever had, or are you infected with influenza disease? They would look at you like, what? No. Well, you mean you've never had the flu? Well, yeah, I've had the flu, but I don't have influenza disease. Well, that means, all that means is you've had the flu before, right? Yet they don't talk about this as measles infections. They call it a disease. Okay, a disease implies that you have this persistent thing that goes on and on. Now, by definition, it really doesn't, but these are keywords and illusions the way that people think in mass, okay? When you say infection, you know what that means. It's a short-term thing. When you say disease, you tend to think this is something that I have that I'm probably going to be dealing with for a long time, if not the rest of my life, right? That's what the general population thinks. When you get infected with measles, people don't think they're going to have a rash and respiratory infection the rest of their life. Yet that's the way that it's presented. Does that make sense? Okay, so we got to look at the way that the information is even just twisted and manipulated to create these pictures that are much different from reality.
Could I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
Back on that other slide?
Yes.
Are you saying that there have been no studies performed or some studies performed?
On these things,
Yeah, on vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
no official studies. Zero.
So there's been studies, but they're not official, as in they hadn't been peer reviewed, or
There,
haven't been anything that's been actually published.
bingo. The government has not done any studies
The
from
government.
any official sources,
The
like
government.
any universities, anything. The only thing that we have is case studies, okay, of individual doctors, which I'm actually going to cover a couple of them. But there have been no major published case, like actual studies looking at the two together, okay? And I'm going to cover the Wakefield thing because, of course, Dr. Andrew Wakefield comes up. And what his study actually said is really funny when you look at it. So we'll get there in a couple minutes.
And yet there are some Americans who have the belief that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the MMR, can cause autism. The CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, however, say that's simply not true. We're here this morning to talk about the need for immunization. Dr. Tanya Dobbs, a pediatrician for the Mobile County Health Department's 8 Mile Health Center. Also in the program this morning, we'll be talking with Dr. Michael Bucknell, a chiropractor and internationally acclaimed wellness advisor, who has his own views regarding the government's push for the measles vaccinations in our country. Well, moms and dads everywhere are also now adding some of their very strong opinions to the dialogue about vaccinations. Now, as we go to the break this morning, let's hear from a mom who took a moment with us to express herself.
I think you need to be vaccinated. There's a reason we're living longer these days. There's a reason why children are healthier. If you want to not vaccinate, that is your, choice, but I would prefer it not to be brought in my school. I would, want my children healthy. I want them to live longer. We have, just like with allergies we have, I think you need to be vaccinated. There's just no other excuse for it. I mean, when how can you look at your child get that sick and be like, it'll be handled? I just can't. You need to be vaccinated. It's your child. You were vaccinated. We were vaccinated. We turned out fine. I'm very pro-vaccine.
All right, so we're gonna cover a couple of those things here. First of all, the reason we're living longer, okay? Because this come up, all the time. It says, yeah.
I can't listen.
I see it on your face, yeah. So the reason we're living longer, it's always proposed that the reason why we're living longer is because we're healthy, and because we don't have all these diseases and everything else anymore. That is not what the case is. Okay, I'm not going to show the whole thing. It's only 4 minutes long. It's not long, but you can go and look this up. Look up Hans Rosling's 200 Countries, 200 Years, 4 Minutes on YouTube. This is a BBC presentation that was created by this guy. He is a statistician. He looks at massive piles of data. He looks at 200 different countries, 200 years of data, and he maps it all out. And basically, they have this fancy 3D overlay, where he shows all of the countries moving in real time. And he walks you through what is actually happening in the world as you see these things happen. Where in one point, for example, he says, and then World War II hits, right? And you see this just big, just boom, just the whole thing just drop down on the map, okay? But the whole point in it, what he shows, what he proves in his data, is that the driver of health is what? Wealth. As wealth continues to rise, we see health go up. Because why? We're seeing better sanitation. We're seeing better food. We're seeing better cleanliness and upkeep of the cities and everything else, upkeep of the streets. Kids not living in squalor, kids not living surrounded in trash and all this other kind of stuff. And it's just fascinating to watch it. So go back and watch it, because that is the reason why the world today is living healthier. It's not, let's just look at that one. As of 2019, the United States is 35th on the list of healthiest countries. 35th. We actually should be where? Top. Number one, we're 35th. That is so far down the list, it's ridiculous. In terms of health consumption, though, okay, now we have the highest GDP of all, the highest growth domestic product, that's wealth of nations of anywhere, okay? In terms of health consumption expenditure per capita, other wealthy countries spend about half as much per person on health than the US spends. When you look at all the other countries that are developed nations that are anywhere in the range of us, like the top 15 or so, they spend half of what we do, yet they're higher on the list than we are. Okay, there's something wrong with it. We should be knowing what's wrong. You know, allergies. She mentioned allergies that we have. Did you know that vaccines are linked to autoimmune inflammatory syndrome caused by the adjuvants? That's in the science. The research is there. Predicting post-vaccination autoimmunity, who might be at risk. In this article, it shows anybody that has a family history of autoimmune conditions, vaccine reactions, allergies, all of those cases should be contraindicated to vaccination because that's where we see the issues. Okay? So the research is there, but we don't see this stuff being talked about, right? Why isn't this on the news? You know, these are old articles too. This one was 2014. This one was 2013. This stuff has been around. You were vaccinated. I was vaccinated. We're fine. Here's the difference right here. Right here, this is 1983. Okay, I was born in 1979. So this is right about the range, around where I got vaccinated, okay? So back then, this is how many vaccines you got at age 6. This is how many you had at by age 18. Not much difference, right? But now, the kids, look at how many vaccines they get compared to what we got. Over twice as much, and by the time 18, almost 3 times as much. It's, I think, 69 doses of vaccines by the time you're 18. Most of them are given many, many shots in one concoction. So we can't compare the two. And we look at the changes over time and we see definite correlations with allergies and asthma and autoimmune conditions. All these things that are linked in the research, okay? So we can't really say you were fine, I was fine, because the times are different, okay?
And welcome back this morning here to talk about the need for immunization. Dr. Tanya Dobbs, a pediatrician for the Mobile County Health Department's 8 Mile Health Center. Thanks for joining us this morning.
It's glad to be here.
Give us an update on where we are in Alabama and most specifically here in South Alabama in Mobile County with the measles concern.
We are very concerned about measles. It's a very contagious infection. Here in the state of Alabama, we don't have any confirmed cases of measles yet, which is great. So far, our children between the ages of 19 and 35 months of age, about 80% of them have received their first dose of the MMR vaccine. And for our children between the ages of 4 and 6 years of age, about 68% have received their second dose of MMR, so that's great.
Okay, so let's look at those numbers. According to the CDC schedule, the first dose of MMR vaccine is to be administered between the ages of 12 and 15 months. According to Dr. Dobbs, only 80% of children between 19 and 35 months have had their first dose, meaning that 1 in 5 Alabama children do not follow the schedule. 1 in 5. Did you guys get that? Have you guys ever heard that kind of a number given before? When you hear the numbers from the schools and everything, what's a picture that's usually created? That if you don't vaccinate, you're like in Neverland. Like that, you know, you're alone. Everybody vaccinates. It's 99% coverage. You're the only person that we know that doesn't vaccinate. Guys, it's 1 in 5. 1 in 5 are not following the schedule. Just in the by the time they're 19 to 35, that's way past the 12 to 15 mark. Okay? According to the CDC schedule, the second dose of MMR vaccine is to be administered between the ages of 4 and 6. According to Dr. Dobbs, only 67 to 68% of children between 4 to 6 have had their second dose. Meaning now, by the time they're 4 to 6 years old, only 1 in 3 Alabama children are following the schedule. Starting to see a little bit different picture going on now, right? Okay? These numbers likely reflect closely across the nation. A recent Wellcome Trust analysis of 140 countries around the world, this was just published this year, 140 countries, found only 79% agree vaccines are at least somewhat safe. So 20% of people can't even agree that they're somewhat safe. Okay? While 84% agree they are at least somewhat effective. That means 15%, even if they think they're safe, there's 15% that can't even agree that they're somewhat effective. Okay? Those are very different numbers than what were being portrayed. That tells you that there's a lot of dissent moving in that direction. So what do you think now, looking at all this in correlation, and looking at these numbers, okay? This means 80% are up to date, 20% are not, and you see that increase continue to slide. That has grown massively over the last 10 years. Massively, okay? What do you think is the most likely motivator, therefore, for the massive measles epidemic campaign and the global push to for vaccine mandates and removing exemptions? Looking at this data, what do you think is the push, is the reason?
Profit.
I mean, yes. It's because they're losing. They're losing. The battle is moving away. The numbers are growing massively and they see it sliding. And so what's really happening? They know that the reason why it's sliding is because more and more people have the ability to choose not to. And so as they do their education, as they do their research, of course, all that misinformation on the internet, whatever, as they decide not to, and they have legal rights for exemptions, then they do. So what we need to do logically is we need to remove exemptions. So we just take them away, and then all you're left with is a medical exemption. We got to leave a medical exemption because some kids can't have it. Of course, it's not kids that have a family history of allergies, autoimmune conditions, autism, not that big a group, but, our doctors have to decide and they have to meet certain parameters, right? This is the motivation. It's because they're losing in the numbers, so they have to change what's moving forward or it's going to continue to go in that direction. They know that. That's why there's all the push. That's why the legislative session ended, and all of a sudden you're seeing measles drop out of the media too. Just like, you guys remember the day that swine flu dropped out of the media? I don't. It just dropped, right? And weeks and weeks later you realize, oh wait, where'd that go, right? They don't just come out and outright declare, oh, it's over, folks, like World War II is over, they've been liberated. No, it's just all of a sudden it's just gone. And you realize weeks later, oh, where'd that go? I guess it ended just like we said it was going to, right? Think about the numbers.
In this recent, concern and a lot of people talking about measles again, have you had a lot of calls and people coming in to want to know, well, are we okay? Are our children okay? What should we be doing right now?
So we have had a lot of patients and families come in and asking whether or not their children are up to date on their vaccines, and that's really great, because if they're not, then if they are of age, then we can administer the MMR vaccine. So we encourage everyone, adults and children, to talk to their doctor to see whether or not they have been immunized against measles.
And you mentioned adults, so there are concerns also about adults who either didn't get it as a child or having a problem where there's an issue of being infected again.
Yes, if you were born after 1957, we want, as an adult, you to have at least one MMR vaccine. Anyone of childbearing age, we want them to have at least one MMR vaccine. Anyone who is going to be going to a post-high school institution, we want you to have 2. If you work in the healthcare field, we want you to have at least 2 doses. And if you're going to be traveling internationally as an adult, we want you to have 2 doses of the MMR vaccine as well.
And now, welcome to the CDC adult vaccination schedule, the first of its kind. Just came out this year. So, didn't see that coming, right? All right, Why do you think, now let's cover this curiosity here first. Why do you think only those born after 1957 are recommended the vaccine?
Because of that chart you showed with the graph and then slide it to the right.
So what happened before 1957?
The data proves against them.
It's
They can't prove.
it's
They already
even,
got it.
Natural immunity.
No, there was no vaccine.
so there was no vaccine. Yes, all of you are right. Okay, and then this is like, honestly, this is such a massive failure of the campaign. They're going to change this next year because it's too glaringly obvious. They have to remove that. Scientifically, they can't remove that, but from a propaganda campaign perspective, this has got to go. Okay, because what this tells you is that before 1957, they know that the population, about 95% of you, had measles, wild measles, natural measles. And what does that mean? You have true lifelong immunity. Therefore, you don't need to get the vaccine because you already had it. It's done, it's over, you're good. Okay? Now, the problem comes as we move 10 years down the road. What happens to that number of people before 1957? It continues to get smaller, right? So what do you think is going to happen to the number of measles cases as we move further? It's going to get bigger. Because the people that are really protecting us right now is not the vaccinated. It's the people that had it, in the earlier days. That population is still, fairly sizable. Okay? So they have lifelong immunity and they don't have to worry about it. According to the CDC, MMR contraindicated during pregnancy. Now, why would it be contraindicated during pregnancy? Anybody want to guess?
Never did that on pregnant.
Okay, yeah. And that would be the easy one. What would be another more dramatic step
Oh,
of that
that's
step?
not my answer.
No, it's true. It's true.
Because it's
But-
live?
Well, how about because it might negatively affect the baby, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because we're using toxic adjuvants like aluminum, right? So it's contraindicated during pregnancy because you don't want to go and give a bunch of pregnant women this stuff and then we end up having babies born with all kinds of issues. So it's contraindicated. After pregnancy, however, listen to this. Anybody in here planning on having another baby in the future? Okay. After pregnancy, but before discharge from your healthcare facility, they want you to get another dose of MMR. It's called a booster, right? So they want to make sure that you just had a baby. Pretty dramatic event. And yet they want to give you an MMR vaccine before you're allowed to go home.
And whoopee hop.
Crazy. Okay? Post-secondary educational institutions and international travels with no evidence of immunity. How do you have evidence of immunity? What if you don't have evidence of immunity? Well, then you just got to get it again. So, now you got all these people. I have no idea how I would even get my vaccination history records. Would you? No. Which means you need to get 2 more doses, right? So now we pulled in a whole other group of people. What was not said is that MMR is contraindicated. This is in there, on their page. MMR contraindicated for severe immunocompromising conditions. So if you have any kind of immune condition, that's a no-no. But we don't need to talk about that because that's only a very, very few small people nowadays, right? Because we're the healthiest country in the world. We're 35th, and what is the rate of disease in this country? It's crazy. Crazy the stuff that we're seeing now. But this is a full schedule. You can get on the CDC website and study that because they, of course, want to make this mandatory too. You as an adult would require a medical exemption to not have to follow this. Anybody voting for that?
Are we gonna be able to vote on that? Or is it something they can push through without
Your vote in the next election
the person?
is voting for this ordinance. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's pretty scary. Thank God I can say that because we're in Alabama. If I said this in New York or California, I probably would have gotten shot right there. Like you guys would all jump me, but that's just reality. As it stands, multiple states have already had religious and philosophical exemptions removed just in the last couple of years. Oregon, Washington, they have removed the exemptions that are there, which means you only have a medical exemption now. In these states where only medical exemptions exist, it becomes the opinion of governing authorities, not your doctors, who should qualify. Okay? This is what's happening now. State investigate 4 doctors for issuing questionable vaccination exemptions. That's in California. This was an article from last week. So if you start writing too many exemptions and one of your compadres out in the field, otherwise known as your competition, turns you in, the state board investigates you and takes away your license because you're giving away exemptions that they don't feel fit. They don't feel fit to model. So we're just going to revoke your license for incompetence. And if you look at this article and you read it, it's crazy because they list all these things like patient has allergic conditions, that are logical reasonings, and yet they paint it out like it's hogwash, right? So this is what's happening. Truth is, this is the unfortunate truth. Non-political. It just is what it is. Truth is, the Democratic Party is almost unanimous in its push to mandate vaccines, with most bills being Democrat-sponsored. So that's why I say your vote is really gonna come down to this, because every single one of the candidates I watch the Democratic debates, every one of them, they want mandated vaccines. That's just how it is. So yes, your votes matter. This is not just a fight for our children. This is you as well. I mean, what about the people that don't have kids? The people that they're well past, their kids are grown, right? Well, it's not, it's not, this isn't about you. You don't have small children at home anymore, right? But it is, because there's an adult schedule now. They're coming for you too. This is crazy. So the objective is mandatory allegiance to the CDC schedule for adults as well, no matter how many vaccines they will add moving forward. Guys, this is about mandating for the future. It's not just now. What has happened to the schedule from 1983 to now? Do you think it's just going to stop? No, look at the pipeline. They have tons of vaccines that are coming down the pipeline. So this isn't going anywhere. This is literally a battle for your medical freedom. I mean, this is big stuff. This is probably the biggest thing going right now that's going under the radar.
When you look at the reason that a lot of people are seeing in the health arena that we're having this reoccurring of measles, is it because of people concerned about the potency of the vaccine, or what exactly are they concerned about?
We have a lot of families that are concerned about the safety of vaccines. They may have personal, philosophical reasons why they object, but it is a very safe vaccine. After one dose of the MMR, you're 93% effective with potentially not getting measles. After getting the second dose, it's 97% effective in preventing measles. So it's a really safe vaccine that we do encourage.
Question: what does really safe have to do with being 97% effective? Anybody catch that? And the thing, all I can point out here is, again, no discredit here. I'm not trying to trash words or anything. It's just that the message is so consistent and just so repeated that we don't even think about the implications of what is being said. Okay, literally said that they're really safe, that they're 97% effective. Well, if they're 97% effective, that has nothing to do with if it's actually safe or not. Yes.
I think that if you corner a doctor on this and you bring up that to them, they're very likely to say, well, you got to weigh the risk against the benefit.
Yes.
So in that case, they're actually admitting that there's maybe a safety issue, but the benefit is that, hey, 97%.
Yeah. I don't know how you consistently are ahead of me. It's like you've already seen my whole presentation, but I actually have that quote in here.
You got a smart client.
It's like you're a couple slides ahead every time. Yeah. The good thing is, yes, you're right on the money. Right on the money, as we're going to see. So the point for that, yeah, safety and effectiveness are two different conversations. They have nothing to do with each other. They shouldn't be in the same sentence. Okay. There is a federal vaccine court, and it's awarded millions of dollars for injuries. There's the link. Despite claims there are many studies implicating vaccines with autism. There's the link. Implicated in the disturbing infant mortality rate in the U.S. compared to other countries. There's a link. Aluminum adjuvant exposure linked to autism and autoimmunity. 4 different links there. Vaccines cause serious adverse reactions, including encephalitis. This is really what they're saying is the bombshell behind all of it. That it's actually an initial encephalitis that the vaccines cause that spiral into all of these other neurological problems. Vaccines contraindicated for anyone with a family history of autoimmunity or allergies, as we already covered. So why is it that all the science is ignored when it comes to vaccine safety? They say that they're safe and that there's never been a study shown linking autism with vaccines and all this. This science is ignored. That's the bottom line. I like what Forrest Moretti says on what's his thing on YouTube. My something opinion. Forrest Moretti, he says on there, the science doesn't matter. He's like, we're not going to win this war on the science. Nobody in this room is going to win the war battling with somebody because you show them the science. The reality is the science doesn't matter. It never has. It never will. This has become a religious discussion. Vaccination is, I wrote an article about this like a month ago. You guys, if you're on my email list, you got it. It's that vaccination is a religion. That's what it has come down to. It's no longer a logical conversation. People deal with it like they do religious beliefs, where it's just, this is what I believe and that's it. I'm not listening to anything else. It's crazy. We've got to start looking at the science and look at what's actually there. Okay?
So I have a question.
Yep.
What is actually there as far as compared to most doctors look at a 20-year study and it costs right at $700 million up to $1 billion to do it.
Yep.
To validate CDC vaccinations. We have an 18-month-old. I'm trying to figure out what direction to go. I've been to 6 doctors I know and I trust, and all 6 have told me absolutely vaccinate. I want to have a piece about it.
Yeah.
My 5-year-old has been vaccinated. But the one thing that they told me is that a lot of the tests have not been validated or gone through like the one the CDC does, this 20-year study. What tests do we have to back up to where I can go back and say, but what about this?
Yeah, well, and that discussion is almost backwards, because the reality is, if you think about it from the other side, you flip that coin over, they're the ones that develop the product, right? It's their product. So therefore, if you, let's take it out of context. Let's say you're selling a automobile, okay? You have to go through all the safety testing and everything in order to prove that your vehicle is safe and fit to put people on the road, right? Yeah. But then there's a company who is completely exempt from having to do those studies at all. And they just create whatever they want and they put it on the road, and they're backed by the government. And no matter how many people are injured or killed in those accidents, they ignore it completely and don't pay attention to it and continue to say, oh, it's safe because we made it, right? That's the story that's going on, is they have not done the studies to prove that they're safe. They're not there. Therefore, well, how can we say that a vaccine is completely safe if you've never tested it, for example, against a non-vaccinated?
So that 20-year study it's not as far as for the safety side of it as well. And I don't know. I just got off the phone with them for 43 minutes on the way over here.
Yeah. So, here's the way that the studies that are done are typically done. They use the vaccine that they're trying to approve, and then they use a different vaccine concoction of ingredients similar to the vaccine as the control group. They don't use no vaccine as the control. That sounds crazy, right? So that's like taking a chemotherapy drug. okay? And you take 3 patients in the study, right? You take 3 patients and they all have end-stage cancer. You give 1 patient the new drug that you're trying to approve. You give another patient another drug that has been on the market and has its own list of side effects and everything, and then another patient that doesn't get a drug at all. That would be logical, right? Because you need. But what they do is they get rid of that third person altogether. They're not in the study. So when they look for an increase in, say, intestinal disorders, which is very common, following, look at autistic kids, almost unanimously, massive gut dysfunction. Okay, that's one of the key tell signs. They don't look at kids that never received anything. They're only comparing kids that also had a concoction of these same ingredients compared to their marketed products. That's wrong. That's scientifically just mind-blowing, right? So until they come up with those studies, they can't make the claims that they're safe. All I can tell you is this. I have 3 kids that have never had a vaccine in their life, and they don't have allergies, they don't have asthma, they haven't gotten sick before, they don't have autism, they don't have anything. They've never taken a drug in their life. My son today got 2 teeth pulled, so that literally, getting that Novocaine in his mouth at 14 years old, that's the first time he's ever had a drug-related product in his body. And that woman right there is the one that delivered all of them, right? So I can give you anecdotal proof, and I could give you, all kinds of other chiropractors that are the same. And that's, but they're saying, well, you don't have scientific proof that your kids are any healthier. But it's not our fault. It's because those with the money to do the studies aren't looking at my kids. You know what I mean? So it's just a very distorted conversation because they're the ones doing the science. They're the ones that should be doing the science, but they're not. You know what I mean? So it's a tough one because now the parent is stuck trying to make these decisions about your kids. Okay? But we'll get safety in numbers here in a second.
So with the outbreak of measles again, is it those who have not had the vaccines getting others infected, or how exactly is it translating since so many people have gotten the vaccine?
So what we're seeing is that a lot of people have not gotten vaccinated, so they are possibly becoming infected. And then we have a lot of patients or people that may be traveling to other countries where there may be measles cases or measles outbreak, and then they bring the infection back. And so definitely, if you have not been vaccinated, or there are pockets of area that have not been vaccinated, then those people are at increased risk of getting the infection.
And that's one of the things we're hearing about being a global community now. We've got people traveling, and when the Ebola breakout happened, people who had gone over to help are coming back. So that's a concern if you are doing traveling out of this country, that you've got to be on top. I remember when I was in the military and went overseas to live for 3.5 years, I had a bunch of vaccines to get before I went there. So this is something you've got to be concerned about.
Yes, we're very, very concerned. So definitely, if you are going to be traveling internationally, it's very important that you talk with your doctor to make sure that you are up to date on your MMR vaccine. You should have at least 2.
This idea of herd immunity, we got to look at this because in the 1930s, Dr. Arthur Hedrick of Chicago observed that after 55% of the child population of Baltimore, Maryland acquired wild measles, the actual natural normal measles, the rest of the population appeared to be completely protected. And this is where the idea of herd immunity came from. Okay? Herd immunity came from natural vaccination, natural immunity, not vaccination. Okay? When the vaccination campaign began in the mid-1960s, the U.S. Public Health Service planned that 55% would be sufficient to eradicate measles by 1967. So they figured it would take 3 years to reach that point because, we only have to hit 55%, right? But the science kind of fell apart, as you know. Okay, upon failure, they've increased to 70 to 75%, then again to 80%, then to 83, 85, 90, and now it's 95%. That's how many times they've updated the herd immunity rates are 99% right now. Yet they still experience outbreaks. So basically what they're saying is that you have to have 100% of the population vaccinated in order to have herd immunity. Yet everybody keeps talking about herd immunity, yet by their own data, herd immunity does not exist. You can't have herd immunity. If it takes 100%, then herd immunity doesn't even exist. So why are we talking about it, even using it as a sell phrase, right? But the reality is it sells. Who cares about the data? It sells. So it sounds good, so let's continue to do it. Kind of like saying depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain, except it's not, right? That idea was proposed in the 1930s, I think, and has never to this day been proven. Yet we still say it is a chemical imbalance in the brain, but it's not, right? So very interesting stuff. As the wild measles population, therefore, like we were talking about, dwindles, we can expect outbreaks to increase regardless of vaccination rates. It will not matter because there's not going to be anybody left that got it wild, these wild cases. And this is why. This is from Immunity Education Group. Okay, vaccination doesn't guarantee immunity. It doesn't. It can't. There's primary failure, which they know scientifically 10 to 75%. That's a pretty wide range. But they know somewhere between 10 and 75% of vaccinated people will not be protected from the disease. How do we know that? Because all of the pockets of outbreaks that have happened everywhere, including the one now, a lot of these people have been vaccinated. And they still got it.
So it's 93% effective after.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yet somehow we have these isolated cases where one of them, I think, like 94, 96% of the group that got them in an area were vaccinated. It was only a very small fraction of the people that weren't vaccinated. So we know there's this primary failure. But then there's secondary failure. We know now that all vaccines wane within about 2 to 15 years. How do we know that? Well, the CDC schedule, the adult schedule, proves that. They wouldn't have a CDC adult schedule if they weren't admitting that they wear off over time. Okay? So somewhere between 2 and 15 years, that leaves vaccinated children and adults unprotected. So there's both primary and secondary levels of failure. As opposed to wild measles is what? Permanent lifetime immunity. Okay? So 100% compliance will not eliminate outbreaks. Plain and simple. It's not going to happen. Okay? And no matter what, they will always find a way to blame it on unvaccinated people. When they're, even if they hit 100%, they would blame it on children that were too young to be vaccinated, right? That's the story because that's what sells.
Now, one of the concerns that a lot of the people that we talk to, and you hear it constantly in the news now, the possible connection between autism and vaccinations, and especially some of the ones that the kids are getting at such a young age. How do you all address that to parents?
So we usually try to talk to them and let them know that vaccines are safe. They have been around for many years. They've been tested through multiple studies, and there's been no link that we have seen to autism from vaccines.
And when you look at that, a lot of information came out a few years ago, and now though they discredited that study, and so have not been able to find any connection there, but it's still an issue and parents are talking about it. Have you given them an idea of what's happening with autism so that they have no correlation between the two?
We do try to, again, talk with them about and encourage them to know that these vaccines are very safe. They have been tested many times, and we haven't shown a link. We think that we're not quite sure exactly what potentially is causing autism, but we have better tools now that are able to help us diagnose and treat those patients. So I think probably because we're able to detect it a lot sooner, we're noticing in more cases that we're able to help those children. And
that seems to happen a lot when we have better detection. We have an overload of people being aware of this.
Okay, let's talk about autism. Did you know that Andrew Wakefield, they constantly pin this. I think you asked about Wakefield, or somebody did. We pin Wakefield as the start of the anti-vaccination movement, right? It was that paper. Everybody always talks about that paper. The one, the one that they got discredited, the one that got debunked, the one that got retracted. all that stuff. They always pin it back because they're trying to purposefully pin it back to the one guy that was wrong, right? The one guy that had a study. What about all the other studies? Don't worry about those. Let's pin it to the guy who got it wrong, right? Did you know that his paper actually read, "We did not prove an association between measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and the syndrome described." That's what it actually said in the article, okay? But it caused reason for concern. It proposed that there may be an association. They didn't find it, but that there was definitely a correlation. And so just because it raised suspicion, that was enough to set off a wildfire, right? And they took his license and called him a quack and ruined his, did everything. They've done everything they can to ruin it. He's done as a researcher, right? Yet he is constantly painted as the godfather of the anti-vax movement. So apparently he's somewhere in here. I don't know which one he is. Maybe he's this little kid here. I don't know, but yeah, this is how long it's been around. Okay, the anti-vaccination movement has been around. Do you know who actually started the anti-vaccination movement? Medical doctors. It was both actually medical doctors and chiropractors. B.J. Plummer, the developer of chiropractic, back in when did chiropractic start? Come on.
In the 1800s,
1894, yeah, somewhere back then. But it's been over 120 years, right? And in his writings, he talks about vaccination not being logical, not being right. There's, that he didn't agree with the philosophy. And we know it's been around chiropractic that long, but the medical doctors were raving that the smallpox vaccine was crazy, that it's not working, it doesn't, it's causing people to be sick, it's killing people, it's maiming people, you're injecting people with cow pus, like this is crazy, and it's continued all the way through. So it's not just a few crackpots, the medical people have been, and there's tons of scientists all over the place even now that are on this road. Yes?
So smallpox and polio. What was the reason that it's gone now?
Same thing as the measles. That it's the change in wealth. It's the change in sanitation standards. DDT is highly implicated with polio. Highly implicated. Yes.
They actually reclassified polio into 3 separate diseases, like poliomyelitis and 2 others, right when the vaccine came out. So the criteria for diagnosis.
And what's even curious, if you look up your phone today, you'll see articles today talking about how the cases of acute flaccid paralysis that are dumbfounding doctors are on the curious rise this year, and they don't know where they're coming from. But if you look at it and you look at what the diagnostic criteria were, they would have been classified as polio. And they even actually used to basically any form of paralysis. They called Bell's palsy. They call that polio. Yeah. So how many people have you seen with Bell's palsy? But they call that polio, and they treat it as polio. And then, like you said, once they came out with the vaccine, they reclassified everything, and they made the diagnostic criteria for it very tight, very small. So all of a sudden, they see the big drop off. So a lot of it is manipulation of data. So
I wonder if doctors actually understand and know that, or because I don't think they're doing it to try to deceive, or because the doctors I talk to are close friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Their kids were vaccinated.
You guys are in nursing school. What do they teach you about vaccines?
If they're safe and effective.
So they don't give you like a book of all this data and research studies and everything else? No, what do they give you?
No, but there are snippets that show. When I study in my drug guide, like the side effects and stuff, I see it in the literature, but they don't teach it in class.
Yeah. They don't teach it. That's Forrest Moretti, the guy that My Incredible Opinion. That's the name of it. You can get on YouTube and look that up, and he's got one where he shows the actual medical literature that doctors are taught regarding vaccinations. It's like 2 pages. That's it. It's basically, this is God. This is science. It's proven. There's no questions. 2 pages done. We don't even have a discussion past that. So it's so ingrained that they don't question it. Yet when, and I'm going to go through a couple of cases, in people where they do see, and there's lots and lots and lots of doctors out there now that are like, guys, we got to wake up. The science is everywhere. It's all over the place. I mean, we're living in a very unique time.
I was going to say, a lot of the continuing education doctors go through are done by the drug reps themselves. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Our pediatrician told us it's the most irresponsible thing we could do. And it's hard to get a pediatrician to see you after you made this choice.
they're there.
If you're not,
They're there. Yeah. To not vaccinate. Yeah. There are pediatricians in the area that will see you gladly if your kids aren't vaccinated.
we were told
that's
by
true,
a doctor that if we didn't vaccinate our youngest daughter, that they wouldn't admit unvaccinated children into their practice.
Yeah, that's what happened last time.
Yeah, they'll tell you that. We went with somebody else.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
hard.
And you know what I tell patients to do? I tell them to send a letter to the doctor thanking them for kicking them out of the practice because they love their new doctor. That's how you change it, right? It's not being an a-hole about it. That's how you change it, because the reality is, yes, your business. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So when the population gets so big of unvaccinated people, they're not going to have anybody left. Guess what's going to happen? Are they going to shut their doors and just go broke? No. Their tone is going to change real quick. I guarantee you. So they only need a couple of letters, though. That's the idea. Is they're not used to hearing it because people just disappear and don't say anything.
And it's harder when it's a friend. You know, it sounds like it's somebody that's personal. I mean, it's more of a, when it's somebody that you know personally, you know that they're not out. But I don't think that they're, anyway, not to say that they're not educated.
Yeah.
They don't have time to be.
And on that note, this is what I tell people all the time. You need to look at your doctors like you would your barber, right? It would just because your friend is a barber, but every time you go in, they like accidentally shave the side of your head, and they butcher you every time. Even though they're your friend, would you continue to go? No. But I see that so often is that people pick doctors because they say what? They say, well, I like my doctor. But the doctor can say anything. They can actually, some of these ones, I'm like, do you know the cases that, and the kind of stuff that has been done and the track record there? But they're like, well, I like my doctor. But what's your cross-reference? Have you seen another one? No. And I'm talking like even chiropractors, like, do you have experience with other ones? Like what? No, I've only seen one. They like them. It's like, I would rather, the point is this, I would rather have an a-hole as my barber or doctor if they're good at what they do.
Right,
right?
Well, this guy's pro-life. I mean, he does surgeries when they're still in the womb.
Yeah.
And I met him at a conference, and I thought for sure he was going to be the one that said, absolutely not, do not vaccinate, but he was not.
Yeah.
And when I asked about ingredients in the vaccinations, and I'm thinking a guy that's pro-life never would say fetal tissues in a vaccination would be good. He said exactly what you're going to have in your slide. The pros outweigh the cons.
Darn right I am. Yeah.
So I mean, that was his exact words.
Yeah.
And he did say this: if you trust a doctor that you go to for your health, why wouldn't you trust him for his advice on whether to vaccinate or not? So.
But on the flip side, I get that question actually thrown back at me from the other side. Is if you get on my YouTube channel, I'll be talking about nutrition, and I had one that said, I'm talking about how bad pork is, and some guy ridiculed me for, how can you say pork is bad for you? When pork is good, pork fat is good, healthy, natural fats. And who are you anyways? You're just a chiropractor. What's your education in nutrition? I've been studying nutrition for 15 years, but he's right. As a chiropractor, we don't get a whole lot of education on nutrition, right?
You get a lot more than medical.
So a lot more than medical doctors. That's true. But we don't get a lot of information on nutrition. But yet he's correct in how he threw that back at me. So, but you see that goes both ways. The question goes back to how much research had they really done on vaccines before making those bold statements? You know what I mean? You know, because I've been studying this stuff for 15 years. And, you know, and I study this stuff for fun, not just in my spare time and reading a couple articles here and there. You can ask my staff. I'm not, you know, I mean, if I'm in my office, I'm reading articles about this stupid stuff. You know what I mean? She's like, yep. Okay. Any other questions on that part? Because we got a bit to go here still.
So when you talk to mothers, do they have an opportunity to schedule their shots so they can space them out, or do they have to go by a strict code of this is how we do it?
So the CDC has their recommendations with each one of their well child visits, what immunizations they should get. And we encourage them to get those immunizations all at one time. But if parents are concerned and they don't want to give the vaccines all at one time, we can work with the families, because our main goal is to make sure that the children are immunized so that they won't get these infections.
So are the health officials now, you all looking at how many are given at such a young age so that maybe that could be something changed in the future, or we're pretty much locked in by the CDC?
We're pretty much locked in with the CDC. It's been studied for years, and it's safe to get those vaccines at those visits. But we do understand that some parents are concerned when they see how many vaccines that the nurse is going to be giving them. So we do try to work with them, because our main goal is to make sure that the children are protected from these infections.
Okay, and you're located, your particular clinic is in the 8 Mile community,
Yes.
so they can come there and have this dialogue and conversation with you all.
Yes.
All right, and of course, we're talking now, a reminder again, how young are you recommending for the program to start?
So typically, children will get their first MMR vaccine between the ages of 12 and 15 months, and then they'll get their second vaccine between the ages of 4 and 6 years of age.
All right, Dr. Tanya Dobbs, we thank you so much for joining us this morning, talking and sharing this information. We'll have you back before we close out today to add more as relates to vaccinations and immunizations and some of the concerns that parents have.
Thank you for having me.
Looking at delayed schedule, okay? Dr. Paul Thomas, author of the Vaccine Friendly Plan, this goes back to that question about what studies have been done, and there's anecdotal studies where doctors have done this in their practices. Okay, so this guy, he wrote this book here. Okay, this is one of the major selling books out there on. He's pro-vaccine himself. That's been his stance because he was traditionally trained like everybody else, and he's pro-vaccine. But he then decided to go and look in his practice and see what he found when kids are following the CDC schedule versus following his reduced, stretched out schedule. Okay? So he did an internal audit on his practice among 3,344 patients. Children following the CDC schedule showed 1 in 45 had autism. 1 in 45. That's a massive number. Okay? It's now, the latest number is 1 in 38 boys. 1 in 38. That means in any typical classroom, one, or every 2 classrooms, I guess, whatever it is, something like that, there's going to be 1 kid that has autism. When I was in school, I don't think there were even 2 kids in the whole school that had autism. You go back to, do you remember any kids in school? That was too long ago. Right? All right. Children following his schedule dropped to 1 in 438 autism rate. 1 in 438. That's a 10-fold drop-off in the autism rate just by delaying the schedule. Yet they say they're locked in to the CDC schedule. We'll go with you, but we're kind of locked into the schedule. It's been studied safe. This is huge. I mean, you see this in 1 case study in someone's clinic. They should be looking at this data and saying, whoa, we have something here. We need to look at this and see if this is on a bigger scale. Let's look in a city. Let's look in a state. Let's look at the data for the whole country, which we already have, so we should do anyways, right? But they don't. However, of 715 children in his practice who had received no vaccines, according to the parents, 1 case of autism. 1 case of 715. That's a curiosity to me. I want to know what's with the 1 case. I would be talking to that parent and finding out the entire history like what happened there, because I wouldn't be surprised if there was something missed, right? There was a misconnection of the data. I'd be surprised. Dr. Bob Sears, he is a famous doctor that was on, he's written multiple books and everything, but he's the author of the vaccine book, which is like the original vaccine schedule book, you know, that a lot of people that do delayed schedules, they still follow. Okay, he offered another delayed schedule. He was immediately labeled as an anti-vaccine quack and spent several years under investigation by the Medical Board of California, which he was just recently released from, where they couldn't find anything to take his license for. So they basically left him alone. But they tried for years to take his license away from him. Dr. Jim Sears, his brother, as quoted in the film Vax, Jim Sears, you might know him. He was on the show The Doctors. Okay, he was in the film Vaxxed. When presented with the data from the CDC provided by CDC whistleblower William Thompson, he said, everything I've been telling my patients for the last 10 years has been based on a lie and a cover-up. This is a pro-vaccine guy. But when he looked at the CDC's own data, he said, I can't believe this. Like, the data is right here. They have it, yet they've been lying to us this whole time. Yet this is the information that doctors get. Okay? You can actually listen to his entire recorded audios are on YouTube. He didn't know that he was being recorded. They recorded the entire thing. I've listened to the entire, hours, like 3 hours worth of information. It's crystal clear, the picture that he is painting. Yet, after they went public with the information, he all of a sudden backtracked on it and made official notices that that's not what he was saying and everything. And he still works at the CDC and has kind of gone into hiding and backed up from the public view and all that because they got to him. But his audios are there. You can't, and you can't fake those things. I mean, it's just the bottom line is you can listen to the whole thing. It's a discussion. Dr. Rachel Ross, she was also on The Doctors, when presented with the very same evidence, said, it's really unbelievable how blatantly the data was switched around. It made me question whether or not this organization that mandates how I practice medicine, if they are lying about this, what else am I being lied to about? She did not vaccinate her kid. And of course, the show The Doctors I don't think is even on anymore because the guy that directed the show, produced the show, is the one that's leading the vax movement now. So they took it away from him, and all these doctors are now not vaccinating anymore. So they're, of course, not on TV anymore either. Okay? This guy, Mayor Eisenstein, I've actually met him before. He said, my partners and I have over 35,000 patients who have never been vaccinated. He has not vaccinated a day in his career. He has never given a vaccine in his entire medical career. You know how many cases we have of autism? Zero. I have made this statement for over 40 years. No vaccines, no autism. These are medical doctors. These are guys that are in practice and out there licensed. They're doing their thing today. So they do exist. There's researchers and doctors all over the world that are on the same wavelength.
Well, most parents agree with Dr. Dobbs as it relates to immunizing their children, but there is a growing number now wanting flexibility and choice in when their kids get the shots and how many at one time. As we go to break this morning, we'll hear from two more moms.
I feel like we should be able to have our own choice because I'm a parent and I don't want nobody to force me to do nothing I don't want to do. So yeah, I think it's a choice thing.
We delay vaccinations, so we still do them, but we delay them. We just feel like it is a lot at one time, and all in the first year. I mean, they get so many, so we do delay them, but we still do them. I think that would be a better approach, and then you would know what vaccination, if there was an issue, you'd know what happened and which one it was, rather than picking through 4 that they got at one time. So I think it would be a better decision.
And welcome back to Perspectives on this Sunday morning. Joining us now, Dr. Michael Bucknell, a chiropractor and internationally acclaimed wellness advisor. And as we mentioned earlier, as it relates to his views regarding the government's push for measles and vaccinations in our country, you have an opinion about that and a view. What is it you share with people when they ask you about this?
I think most of us are on the same page as far as it should remain a choice. That's really what it comes down to. Is when it came down to, I've held these views for years, based on all of my research, and I haven't been out there trying to force other people not to. When it comes down to it, and it's and people want their choice, I'm not going to chastise them for their choice. But that's really what it comes down to: is I should be able to choose with my own children, as I have, what they're going to be exposed to and what they're not going to be exposed to, and that's what most parents want.
And when you hear that, and you hear from the other side of concerns about your child being with other children and not being vaccinated, so ever a fear on your side, or just on the others where the kids who have not been vaccinated?
Well, if you watch history, the story changes. That it used to be one thing, and now it's moving to this new term, vaccine hesitancy. It's just because we're uneducated and we're hesitant to get vaccines. It's not hesitancy. It's refusal. We don't want them. And that's really what it comes down to. Is parents, they know what they're seeing and what they're exposed to and things like that, and they've done their research, but we shouldn't be forced to do something that we don't want to, and we shouldn't be, and when the story gets changed to, well, what about the kids that can't get vaccines? That's only been, used in the last year or so, and that's kind of like the new catchphrase comes along every year. It evolves and it changes to, because the situation is changing, as more and more people are refusing.
So are you hearing more parents in that thought process, or is it still a small group of people who are making the decisions?
I've said for a long time, I think that the reported numbers are far less than they actually are, because in the real world, when you talk to people, and it's not, you don't feel outlandish, you don't feel like you're the crazy loon running around the woods kind of a thing anymore. Most parents are kind of on the same page, it seems, that at least they just want the opportunity to choose. And the reality is, if your kid's gotten vaccinated and they protect you, you don't have anything to worry about anyways. So it really shouldn't be another parent's decision whether you do what with your kids, one thing or another. That's your choice.
It's funny as I turn over this way, I'm looking at the quote on the wall right here. A truth's initial commotion is directly proportional to how deeply the lie was believed. It wasn't the world being round that agitated people, but that the world wasn't flat. When a well-packaged web of lies has been sold gradually to the masses over generations, the truth will seem utterly preposterous and its speaker a raving lunatic. So, that tells perfectly exactly what's going on here. When we look at this fear, should vaccinated children fear unvaccinated children? Right? Why would they? Because if,
they're safe and effective.
Right. They've already gotten the vaccine, so they should be protected.
Yeah, but the only thing they could feel bad about is, maybe I can infect them because they're not protected.
Should unvaccinated children fear vaccinated children?
Okay, 2 bullets ahead.
Yes. We're still working ahead. Yeah. But that's it. Vaccinated children should not fear unvaccinated children because, number one, they're already protected. Number two, there's got to be a basis for that. What's the actual infection rate? 1,000 cases in the entire United States. The cases aren't there. There's not one in Alabama, so what are you fearing? Right? Okay? Should unvaccinated children fear unvaccinated children? Well, again, it comes down to the numbers. Where are the numbers coming from? If everybody around you saw had measles, now, okay, maybe, now I want to know, how dangerous is measles, right? That's what is important. It's not, how quickly do I go and get a vaccine, right? I want to know, what does the disease look like? What does the infection look like? Should unvaccinated children, we already covered that. No. Unvaccinated children arguably should be the ones that are worried because the value of getting infected, right? Because I'm not seeing wild measles anywhere. So, however, if you go and you get the vaccine, that's the only thing that even comes close to being measles that I'm going to be exposed to, right? Hence why there's cases that are getting measles from the injection, They're there. So I should be the one that's worried, not the other way around, right? But I'm not. What does that tell you, right? It tells you that we're looking at this thing a little bit differently. Just like statistics covered in my my workshop. If you get on my YouTube channel, watch this workshop. It's only 30 minutes. Vaccination, the missing questions. Okay? In a U.S. population, there's 327 million people here in the United States. There have been 1,095 cases as of last week. There's only been 7 more this week. They're saying it's on a huge drop off. Okay? 7 more cases. So it's like right at 1,100 cases in the U.S. this year. There have been 0 deaths. So simple math tells you that the infection rate is 0.00003%. Does that sound scary? Not to anybody logical, okay? The risk of death is effective 0. This is math. I mean, you can't lie about numbers. It's just math, right? So I don't know where the fear is coming from, especially, again, watch the vitamin A workshop and you'll see they're really not. I mean, I would know exactly what to do even if my kid got measles, so no, I'm not worried about it, right?
As we heard earlier from Dr. Dobbs, the whole global positioning now has changed people's concerns and fears. Do you think that's one that you would have if you decided to take your kids to some of the foreign countries?
Yeah, it wouldn't change, and we have, and in fact, in a lot of other countries that we've been to, they don't talk about it. In fact, when I was over in Israel, I asked multiple people what their thoughts were, and they looked at me like, vaccines? Like, we don't talk about it at all. Mm-hmm. Like, we've got terrorists and stuff, that it's the problems that other countries have, that they're dealing with, but vaccines isn't necessarily the topic. When you go to most countries, they don't check you at the airport, they don't ask you for them. I hear a lot about missions trips, you need to get caught up and everything, but the reality is when you get there, most of them don't even ask. It's not as big of a concern for them.
Yeah, my wife, she watches it, she said, "You said that on TV." Okay. Open book. The Western world is changing, okay? Vaccinating your child is not required by law in Israel. It's not. You are not required to get them. They still support them openly on their website and everything, but you're not required by law. You have the freedom to decide what you're going to do. The University of Haifa completed a study funded by the Israel National Institute for Health Policy Research. They found that 7.4% of the population had not completed vaccines according to their schedule, which is much less vaccines than our schedule, and it's much more delayed than our CDC schedule. Get on and look at Israel's schedule. It's radically different from ours. We have far less, yet still their population, 7.4%, they're not following it, even as limited as it is. Okay? And that's with not talking about it. So what you see is their numbers are following the trends with the rest of the world. And in fact, it tells a slightly different story that when you look at other countries like France and Italy, where they're pushing it a lot, in the US, wherever they push vaccines on you more and more, it's putting it in your face. So what do you see that the numbers of people are rejecting? They're actually going higher. By them pushing, they're getting pushed back. It's pretty interesting. Okay, from our perspective, the hardcore of those who refuse refraining on an ideological basis was 41.3% of those. See, the funny thing is you look outside the country and you see other people's numbers and they actually look at this stuff and they give you the data. Okay, so what they just said is what? These are not vaccine hesitant people. Half of the people that don't vaccinate, it's ideological. They're not going to. There's no hesitancy. They're not going to. That's what they're saying. The university-educated parents were 2.13 times more likely to refuse compared to those with a high school level education. So of that 41%, about 20%, or sorry, about 27%, something like that, were highly educated. It was the group that was less educated are more likely to vaccinate. That's what they're saying there. And we find the same data all over the world. The higher the education level, the more likely you are to not vaccinate.
Is that current, or is that,
Yes.
when was that day? When was
This study was current. This was just done here in the last couple of years. I don't have the exact date on it, but this came off of their website. It actually came off their CDC equivalent website. Let's see. So the tipping point. Okay, the tipping point is that dramatic moment when little causes drive the unexpected to become expected and propel the idea of radical change to certain acceptance. So I throw this in there pointing out that this is the way information always trends. Okay, when an idea changes, when the earth became round, even though it was always round, but when it became round, okay, there were the early innovators who were absolute morons, right? Nobody believed them. They were abominations. The church talked about them. The authorities talked about them. The researchers and scientists talked about them and everything else. But they were the innovators of the information. But once things reach this tipping point, this is a scientific anomaly, that once you hit that point in this early adopter phase, there becomes a mass change, right? And so then you hit this early majority, and then naturally that curve starts to drop off as most of the population has already figured out, so you have this late majority, and then there's always the laggards who are so stuck on the ideology that they're going to continue. And guess what? We still have flat earthers today, right? You guys know that, right? There's still flat earth theory. There's lots of people that believe that, well, these are the laggards, right? They've missed the satellite images and pictures from spaceships, right? So I'm sorry if you believe in flat earth, but so we've got to understand how this works. And this is the data that's being shown all over the world on this issue. Okay, it's not just here in America, and it's not just because of the internet.
Well, from your perspective, why is it such a issue here, do you believe, in the USA? Is it's why they want to get everyone vaccinated? Because we did have issues back in the turn of the century, as well as the huge immigration move to the U.S.
And all you have to do is look at the numbers, okay? You look at the numbers, and things don't add up, okay? Since the year 2000, I just happened to look it up, and dealing with these numbers, there's been 38 people that have died from snake bites, okay, in the last 20 years. There's been 19 people who have died from shark attacks, or it might be flipped, one of the two. But either way, there's been 11 deaths that are related to measles. Okay, 11. There's over 50 people a year that die from lightning strikes. But why don't we hear about these things? Why aren't they on the same level as this global, this emergency state that's just blaring across all forms of media?
So why is that happening? Why do you think it's happening?
I think it comes down to simple. It's you follow the money that's being made by it, and it's really about securing the profits for decades to come. This little uptick, when you talk about a country that's got millions and millions of people and there's less than 1,000 cases, there's not one in the single state of Alabama. There's been absolutely 0 deaths in the entire United States, despite 1,100 cases or so. Why is there this big push? And it comes down to because the numbers are collapsing. As you saw, 28% of people now do not believe that vaccines are safe and effective. That number is much bigger than it was 10 years ago. So when they see the numbers collapsing, we've got to do something to stop that, because what happens next?
So are they actually making money, you believe, off of this?
Oh, absolutely.
Other than the drug companies, or
drug companies? Anybody that's along the chain is profiting in one way or another, And so of course, people are profiting from it, and of course, there's going to be protection of business in the meantime. And you know what? If that's fine. Don't push it on me. That's kind of the standpoint for most people.
Your main platform is you have a choice to make that decision.
Yeah.
And of course, we're hearing more now, the government getting involved in some of the states, and so that is going to be an issue.
Right.
All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk double standard.
This is actually a graphic of what I just covered there. This is the deaths over the last 20 years. Okay, you've got lightning strikes that have killed over 1,000 people. Snake bites have killed 38, sharks 19, measles 11. Okay, just to put that in perspective, that you look at motor vehicle accidents, you wouldn't even be able to see these numbers. You wouldn't even be able to see lightning. motor vehicle accidents kill, it's the number one killer of children. And the second one is accidents and injuries, right? So why the big push? We're not talking about seatbelt safety and car seats, right? I mean, most people don't even know if you get in a car accident, you're supposed to throw away a car seat and buy a new one because of microfractures in the plastic and everything. Most people don't know that. Why aren't we talking about that? Because it's not a moneymaker, right? So what profit is to be gained by means of sharks, snakes, and lightning strikes? There's no profit there. There's nothing to be made. There's no business there, so we don't talk about it. However, first quarter 2019, MMR vaccine profits for Merck reported a 27% increase in sales this year. Why? Obviously, because we talked about measles everywhere. So they managed to, through that campaign, increase their sales by $496 million. That's how much they made. Merck, $496 million. More than last year. That's more than last year. These are crazy numbers. Okay, I'm sorry, no. It's 27% increase to 497. Okay, so it was 300 and something last year. That's still a lot of money to be made. Okay, considering their total first quarter sales were 10.8 billion, some argue the profit is small. Come on, we're not worried about making money. I mean, look at us. We're $10.8 billion. Why are we worried about $496 million? The profit's small. That's what the naysayers say. They'll find a way to rationalize it away. Anybody in here think an extra $100 million is small? Yeah, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. You can do a lot with that. So by mandating vaccines for both adults and children, do the math over a decade. I mean, we could add that, but if we just mandated vaccines to children, we would arguably increase that number by another 30%. Now you add in adults too, you could add another 30%. We're talking close to, $800 million? That's big money. You can't look at it any other way. You're talking billions over the course of decades, and that's just one vaccine. Now they start adding other multiples of vaccines. This is big money. This is business.
Well, I also think any business would take a 5% cut.
Yeah.
It's 5%.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we'll be talking more and closing out that A word, autism and other concerns, as mentioned by most of the moms that we talked to, actually. Now, I would not hesitate to say that it may be something that all expecting parents do have a concern about. Now, as we go to break, we hear from a mom who shares her opinion on if there's a connection between autism and vaccinations.
I don't think it has anything to do with autism, me personally. If you want to get vaccinated and you want to do it at different times, if you discuss that with your healthcare provider and you discuss it with your doctor and they see it fit for your child, go ahead and do it. With me, I trust my pediatrician, I trust my doctors. I'm going to do what we do to keep my kids safe.
Actually have something to do with some of the things that children are coming up with. It's a rash of autism now, and it's ridiculous, and my children have reactions behind the vaccinations, but I know it's necessary, and then with the babies, they give them so much at one time. Maybe they should investigate maybe making the vaccinations last longer, that way they can maybe meet the people who don't want to do it halfway, So that would be my take on it. Do a little bit more investigation on it to make it more durable, safe, not so many, and then on the flip side, maybe the other parents would go ahead and say, you know what, well, let's go ahead and agree and do this and everybody can remain safe.
Sort of a balanced opinion there where mom is trying to find a happy medium between what we have going on now with the measles outbreak, with people talking about mandatory vaccinations and immunizations, and then other parents talking about just give me the choice to do this. Dr. Dobbs, as we close out this morning, what would you say to parents, and especially after hearing that comment?
I would try to reassure her that our vaccines are safe, that measles is a serious respiratory infection that can cause complications. It's not just a fever and rash that can occur, and that this is totally preventable if they do get the MMR vaccine.
And of course, at your clinic, that is available for babies starting at what age?
At age 12 months, 12 to 15 months of age is the first time that they can get the vaccine.
All right, of course, you're at the Mobile County Health Department's new clinic there in 8 Mile.
Yes.
I've challenged throughout this, obviously, safe. I've challenged totally preventable, so we don't need to cover all that again. But while claiming vaccines don't cause autism, despite this ever-increasing evidence, both scientific and anecdotal, authorities fail to give any reasoning for this whatsoever. Did you notice that? They don't give a reason. But actually, I think they did give. I think they do give a reason, and it was in the earlier statements. They said we've come up with better testing and better treatments. What does that translate to?
You still have autism.
You still have autism, but we're making more and more money off of testing and treatments. So autism actually becomes a good thing from a profit standpoint, sadly. So, you've got to ask, do we want the cure for autism? Do we want the cure for cancer? I mean, it's kind of in the same boat. So, this is not being addressed. It's not. Nobody's addressed it. Yet, look at this trend. It's now 1 in 38. It's crazy.
And Dr. Bucknell, as you hear the mom, they're trying to find a happy medium between what's going on. What do you say to parents who you talk to?
Parents all want the same thing. They want fair and balanced testing, which won't be done. There's never been a study, an official study done that looks at the actual health status of vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. And I would gladly let my kids take that test because they've never been sick. I have 3 kids. They've never been sick. They don't have allergies and ear infections and all this other stuff. And we see the same thing all over the place. But it's not going to be done. Yet private doctors have done it in their clinic. And they find that the ones that follow the CDC schedule are about the average. 1 in 38 boys are autistic. One doctor, Paul Thomas, he wrote the book on delayed schedule. He found in his own clinic that when they followed his schedule, it reduced to 1 in 400 with autism. Yet in his same clinic, those that were fully unvaccinated, it dropped down to 1 in 700. And that's after 15 plus years of practice. This is actually in the real world setting. But that is not being done on the official level, and I don't think it ever will be.
So this was a book that's out on the market, J.B. Handley's How to End the Autism Epidemic. And in this is a discussion between Dr. Kelly is a very prominent researcher that has been used as a vaccine advocate for many, many years. Okay, he was one of the go-to guys that is referenced by the CDC and all these big organizations all the time. Okay, but this was actually in a court setting. Okay, listen to the words here. Lawyer, do you agree with the statement that vaccines do not cause autism? Dr. Kelly, no. Lawyer, is it generally accepted in the medical community that vaccines do not cause autism? Dr. Kelly, it is a common opinion. Lawyer, it is generally accepted in the medical field that vaccines do not cause autism. Dr. Kelly, I have no basis to judge that. It is most often when physicians are commenting on that they say there is no proven association. Lawyer, do you know the position of the American Academy of Pediatrics about any link between vaccines and autism? Dr. Kelly, yes. They also say there is no proven association. Lawyer, do you agree with the position of the American Academy of Pediatrics? Dr. Kelly, I agree with their position as a public health measure. I think you mentioned that, right? So when you look at it as a whole, as a public health measure, I don't agree with it scientifically. Lawyer, you are actually arguing for a link between vaccines and autism in this case, aren't you? Dr. Kelly, I am. Lawyer, and that is contrary to the medical literature, isn't it? Dr. Kelly, it's not contrary to the medical literature that I read. It is contrary to certain published articles by very authoritative groups who say there is no proven association in large cohort studies. Lawyer, your opinion is contrary to, say, the position of the CDC, correct? Dr. Kelly, it is contrary to their conclusion. It is not contrary to their data. Scary stuff, okay? Dr. Plotkin, You guys probably don't know this book. The Ford is by Bill Gates, if that tells you anything. Okay? This is the vaccine Bible. In fact, this guy said that he thinks this book is more factual than the Bible. That's what Dr. Plotkin says. Okay? So he believes this stuff. Okay? This is the guy that writes the book on it. Literally, this is the book that everybody around the world looks to. He is the world's leading authority on vaccines. He served as consultant and developer on several current CDC recommended vaccines. His full 9-hour deposition is available to watch on YouTube, along with William Thompson's full audio recordings. Okay, so you can sit there and you can watch the entire 9 hours of this thing. Okay? He's openly atheist and revealed his objection to religious exemption. He thinks it's absolutely ridiculous that anybody could use faith as a reason to object to vaccines because, of course, it's a myth. So why should that be an excuse, right? He admitted using the tissues of 76 fetuses in just one study that he performed. 76 babies he used in one study, quoting, and this is his quote, "The Catholic Church has actually issued a document on that. I think it implies that I am the individual that will go to hell because of the use of aborted tissues, which I am glad to do." Okay? This is the guy that writes the book on it. He said in deposition, he receives no funding from any of the pharmaceutical companies. But then his tax returns were thrown across the table to him, and he stood corrected. How can you forget that you got millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical companies? Doesn't add up. He confirmed many vaccines are only monitored for side effects for a few days and are grossly underreported. He never admitted that. He basically said, we don't look at these things long term. They're short term. We look at them a little bit. Attorney, if you don't know whether DTaP or Tdap cause autism, shouldn't you wait until you do know, until you have the science to support it, to then say vaccines don't cause autism? Dr. Plotkin, do I wait? No. I have to take into account the health of the child. This is exactly what you said. That's exactly what the last guy said, right? Attorney, and so for that reason, you are okay telling the parent that DTaP, Tdap does not cause autism, even though the science isn't there yet to support that claim. He said, absolutely. This is the head guy out there that's writing the rules on this stuff, that creates the vaccines, and yet he says, the idea comes before the science. The science doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This isn't a scientific discussion.
Dr. Dobbs, do you hear the dialogue taking place in your arena where doctors are talking more about their concerns and maybe addressing whether or not there's a different look at how we give it, when we give it, and how many at one time?
Yes, like I said, we do talk about it amongst ourselves with other clinicians, and with parents, we do try to go by what the CDC says, but we do try to work with families if they do want to space them out, because our main goal is to make sure that the children do get vaccinated and they are safe from some of these preventable infections.
The same thing. He says the same statement every single time.
So we have, they say the idea of the parents is what's important, right? This is a little bit of it, okay? The Mobile County Health Department, we have watched the progression of changes over the last 15 years. I pay attention. I know what's going on. I see what's going on. And I've argued with them many times about all this different stuff, and we've had all kinds of issues with it. But when it comes to the acquisition of legal exemptions, okay, the Alabama Code says, and this is, by the way, this is my exemption form that any people can get on my website and download this form and fill it out for your kid and go downtown and get your perfectly legal exemption, no questions asked. This shouldn't be a discussion. It says in the rules, in the absence of an epidemic or immediate threat thereof, the parent or guardian of the child shall object thereto in writing on grounds that such immunization or testing conflicts with his religious tenets and practices, or certification by a competent medical authority providing individual exemption from the required immunization or testing is presented to the admissions office of the school. So your religious tenets and practices, does that mean you have to be Baptist or you have to be Scientologist or Orthodox Jewish? No. You look up the definition of religion, it's against your personal beliefs and convictions. Period. They can't even ask you what your religion is. This is against what I feel is right. This is my personal choice. And that's within the law to do. Yet, they've said when parents have gone down there, they say, oh, we don't have it. No, we don't offer that. They've said, oh, you have to go to another location. We don't have those forms here. You have to go to that clinic and drive all the way across town. They've said, oh, you have to watch a video where we're going to scare you with all these cases for 15 minutes. While the patient is really just sitting there on their phone on Facebook, typing out how ridiculous it is that they're sitting in the office watching this stupid video that they're not even watching, right? That's, we've seen that out. You must talk with a clinician where the doctor comes into the room and tries to talk you out of it for the next 15, 20 minutes. I had that happen personally, and that conversation lasted about 30 seconds. You must sign a form. So, they went through that where you have to sign a form that says that if there's a breakout that, you understand that this and that and the other, and you have to sign the form. That is not in the law. You don't have to sign the form, okay? You must pay a $30 fee. Ironically, you know what? The only time that I ever saw them talk about on TV, I was sitting there. I remember the moment like it was yesterday. I was sitting next door eating breakfast, and on the news, they were talking about the school immunizations. This was last year, and they said, if you go to the health department, you can get a religious exemption. And I was like, what? And they said, you just pay a $30 fee. And I'm like, oh, well, there it is. Because they can monetize it, now they're going to promote it. But before that, it doesn't exist. Right? So no, it's not easy. They don't make it easy, but it is your right to get the form. Still now. Unless they change it. So you better be vigilant to fight if that comes up, because there's a lot of people that don't pay attention. Okay?
Well, we thank both of you all for joining us and sharing the information today, and hopefully it answers some of the parents' fears, concerns that there are options where even if you are mandated, there are some options.
Yes.
And then, of course, as you have evaluated and looked at the research over the years, there's some things that parents can do to make sure their kids are healthy.
Yep.
Well, thanks again for joining us on Perspectives. And for more information on measles and immunization programs, you can call the Mobile County Health Department at the number you see there on the screen. And if you'd like to contact Dr. Bucknell as well, his phone number is included as well for more information. Well, please join us here next Sunday morning at 7:30 for Perspectives as we discuss more important issues and seeking solutions. If you have ideas of topics that you'd like for us to address, just drop us a line here at perspectives@fox10tv.com. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great
To summarize and put this whole thing to bed, if you will, I wanted to go through. This is my comprehensive stance on vaccines. Okay, this is over 15 years of researching this stuff and really, making this a regular part of my studies. Okay, this isn't something I just pick up here and there. Okay, vaccine theory is sound by principle. It is. Okay, the idea that you would be affected to a small degree by something in order to build immunity makes sense. You can do that with snake bites, right? You can inject little bits of venom over time, and you will actually build an immunity to that snake bite. It's sound, right? We all know that. So the principle is sound. The problem is the practice itself is unsound. It's an assault on the body and immune system. It doesn't follow the normal patterns of immunity. Okay, you don't get infected by getting stuck directly into your bloodstream and muscle tissue. You don't. How do you get these things? Breathing it in, getting it in your mouth. These are where the normal mechanism, they've done that and they don't work the same, right? Because your body doesn't really accept it the same. It doesn't freak out, right? Because your body has natural immune abilities to protect you through those mechanisms. But in order for a vaccine to work, Okay? They have to put it directly into your body, bypassing every single one of those protections so that your body makes a massive immunological response to the toxic adjuvants that are there by purpose. They have to have the toxic adjuvants or else nothing happens. It's the toxic adjuvants that make your body react. Okay? So the process itself doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Okay? With increased globalization, two factors come into play. One, in my opinion, unless it's man-made, we will never again experience an epidemic of historical severity due to global intermixing rather than true isolation. Okay? So we're so intermixed as a population that you're not going to have situations like the Aztecs and the Indians, where all of a sudden you've never been exposed to anything before, unless it's something completely and entirely new. Something that was created in a lab to do just that. It's not going to happen. So we don't have to worry about that. Okay? Number two, because we can't control cross-contamination because of that globalization, then herd immunity, or we can't control herd immunity through artificial means, we already know and established that doesn't work, then it's not cost nor effort effective to continue down that path unless it's for the sake of profit alone. Does that make sense? So it logically doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. So we can either continue to push down that path for the next 100 years or realize we're on the wrong path and start doing things different. Okay, what is that different? Like cancer, there may be more than one cause, but the principle remains the same, that the power of the body made the body. It heals itself above, down, inside out. That's how it works. Okay, your body heals inside out. It's not going to come from outside in. So what's more important? Internal integrity is and will and always will be more important than external influence. I'm not worried. When it comes to my kids, the reason why I can be confident about that, I'm not worried about the external influence because we constantly work on internal integrity, right? We're constantly working on health. Notice that the medical system is not a health care system. That's a misnomer. It is a sick care system. That's all they focus on is disease. You can see that in the population because look at our food. Look at the way that we advertise. Look at what is allowed as far as fast food and everything goes. So we've got to focus on internal integrity. We're not focusing on the right thing altogether, right? So the best offense is a good defense. You guys have heard that over and over and over repeatedly. You know, it makes sense in sports, you know, but for some reason health is backwards. No, the best offense is a good defense. Vaccines are not defense. They are a preemptive attack in military terms. They're an assault on the body. We should focus research on health integrity and two, rapid recovery. Okay? What I'm interested in, when it comes to measles, we shouldn't be focusing, or not measles, autism. We shouldn't be focusing our research on detection. We shouldn't be focusing it on treatment. We should be focusing on the kids that have reversed it. We should be doing case studies on those kids. Where are these cases of kids that had it and are now perfectly normal functioning adults? And what did they do? Right? That would be good science. But are those kids looked at? No, they're quacks. Because that's not profitable. Okay? Same thing with measles. The CDC guidelines, not CDC, the World Health Organization guidelines are give kids vitamin A with measles. That's it. Give vitamin A. Because they know when they give vitamin A, you cut the risk of death to effective zero. That's why we don't see deaths anymore. Because malnutrition is not really a factor, and when you just give them vitamin A, it's fine anyways. Where do you see measles deaths still occurring? In populations that are eating nothing but rice every day. I cover that in the measles workshop, or in the vitamin A workshop. So this is where we need to focus. But you understand, this has got to be an individual effort because it's not going to be a collective effort anytime soon, right? This is not on the public agenda. This is misinformation. This is stuff you learn off the internet. That's what this is categorized as. And anybody that believes this way is just vaccine hesitant. So that's where we are. Start doing your research, and work on getting your kids healthy. That's how you don't worry about it. All right? So if you have any other questions, if anybody has any questions, this should be a discussion. It shouldn't be an argument, right? We've made it into an argument because it's based on, more, like I said, religion than it is on science. So, of course, if you have any questions that aren't just, yelling at, from one side, any discussion, I would gladly have a discussion. I'll answer any questions I can. I mean, that's the whole point. And at the end of the day, people that choose to still vaccinate, there's still patients in my practice. Why am I not kicking out patients who vaccinate? I have patients that we've had the discussion, they still choose to not listen to me. And guess what? I still love them. Like, they're still patients in my office, and like, that's how it is. That's called life, right? So it shouldn't be a religious discussion. This is something that we can just talk about, and you choose how you choose, but I'm here to give the other side that you're just not going to get from the official standpoint. So thank you for coming. I know it went long, but we just had, you understand now why we only had 30 minutes on the show, and I'm biting my tongue the entire time, just like, oh my God, I just want to, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. Like, can we debate this stuff? Like, but no, no debate to be had, right? So this really needed to be about a 4-hour debate on a stage, but instead it was a 30-minute show. So, but like I said, if you have any questions, let me know. If anybody on Facebook or YouTube has any questions, post them in the comments. But outside of that, stay tuned, stay focused, get and do your digging. Don't just settle for anything. Question everything. That's the motto of the day. All right. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you.